Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility. It's 15th of October, and it's our 50th episode. Woohoo!
Yes.
And tonight we ask Kim Meredith, aka the Deal Diva, and Clive Price, our sales guru, all about is everything negotiable. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility, where we explore ideas, challenge thinking, and inspire action. I'm Talana Simpson, and with me is John O'Dix.
Hi, good evening.
And we're asking the question, is everything negotiable? With our guests Clive and Kim. Clive Price is a sales maestro and the managing director of the Peer Group, which offers professional sales training. And Kim Meredith spent a significant part of her professional life doing deals and now teaches others what she's learned as the Chief Executive Officer of the Deal Makers Programs Company. The Devil in the Deal is her latest book about deal making.
Thanks, Talana.
But before we even hear your views around the question tonight, we thought we'd just basically get clear on what we're actually talking about when we say negotiating. Because it seems to overlap with a whole lot of other terms that get bantered around and that. So, Kim, maybe start with you. How would you define negotiation?
In its simplest terms, it's really trading. It's giving to get, or quid pro quo, or something for something. And if you think about the world's oldest profession, imagine the olden days.
Didn't take long for that to come up, by the way.
When the first lady, or it might not have been a lady, we're not sure, but went to sell her goods, she probably got a chicken in exchange for certain favors. So as far as I'm concerned, it is the world's oldest profession. Negotiation is right there with it, because presumably the lady wouldn't have offered her favors for nothing. So
Is that negotiation, or is that just paying for a service?
It depends. It could be, paying could be the pre-agreed rate, but what if she wanted 2 chickens because the chap was particularly foul, he hadn't bathed in maybe 3 years, who knows?
So maybe then it's where does selling come into negotiating? Would you say, is selling part of negotiating, Clive?
Yeah. Thanks, Talana, and welcome to your viewers. I would suggest with selling we'd be a little bit tighter in terms of the outcome. And I know the win-win outcome is a very hackneyed expression, but I would suggest that ultimately both parties in sales are striving for that. And if they're not striving to reach that, then we reach win-lose, which is a short-term solution, and one person will lose. And we obviously know about the lose-lose, everybody loses. So in sales, I would suggest it's the activities that lead up to a successful negotiation. I would define that as a win-win. And yes, coming back to what Kim said, is in the broad sense, negotiating really is everything we do every day, whether we know it or not, consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, because we say we're always selling ourselves. But then what about deal making? How's deal making different to negotiating? Yeah.
For me, the classic definition of deal making, and deal making is something, hopefully, that my organization coined. It's, yes, the term has been around for a very long time, but it's always been thought of somebody who's like a broker or a dealer at, if you Google it, or you find interesting things like a dealer at a casino. And so we've trailblazed and just said deal making for us is a combination of negotiation, of selling, of communication, and of power. And it's how you put those 4 components together and how you leverage them to get an outcome that both parties want. So where selling might be win-win, as Clive says, for us deal making is value for value. It takes the selling component, which is about persuasion and overcoming objections and convincing the person to buy your services or product. Negotiation, on the other side, is trading. You give to get. So for any concession you make, you get something in return. And those two combined give you value for value. And when the person with whom you're doing business looks at and looks at their value, they must be happy with it, and so must you. And it's how you put that package of value for value together.
So the difference in, what is the difference in between value for value and win-win? Because if I'm in a scenario where it's win-win, there must be some level of value for value right there.
Remember where win-win comes from. As Clive said, before there was win-lose, and you think of the old style trade union negotiations of the 70s, maybe in the UK, where for the unions to win, management had to be defeated. And in the 1980s, it got more cooperative, and we both had to feel win-win. Now, for me, win-win is not tangible enough. It's a sensation, almost an emotion of where you're happy at that moment. And my concern is, does it transfer ultimately and into a long-term deal? So I'm not taking anything away from win-win, and I think in selling it's very important where people are making decisions based on their emotions to a large extent. People buy from people. It's about the feeling. Whereas in deal making, you want to be able to sit down and quantify even the non-tangibles. So
I totally agree with what you're saying, Kim. And Jono's question was very good, Talana, and that was value for value. Because but again, it's how. The next question that leads on is, how do we define value? And I've battled with this personally as well. Is value is an intangible, but we can make it tangible if we look at how we break down a definition. And I've tried to come to a very simple equation to define value. And value for me would be that the inclination to buy is far greater than the price. Because usually everybody thinks about price as being the stumbling block stroke negotiating block. And then the second point is, I know personally, if I walk out of a business transaction and I feel resentful, just a kind of gut feel that I've been screwed or exploited, for me that's just a hands-on signal that I shouldn't have done something, or I shouldn't have conceded.
It's a problem one too, because a lot of people feel like they're manipulated, or the selling has that tarnish and reputation. And then always even wants to go into like bribery or blackmail, where because that's a form of negotiation, isn't it?
And that's a different topic for a different evening. I mean, but it's pretty much non-negotiable. We've been offered chai, as they call it in Eastern Africa, where we have clients, and we've been offered in other things like gratuities, and that to me, that is, if you're going to ask the question, is everything negotiable? Frankly, that is one example of where things are not negotiable.
If I might, Clive, and I mean no disrespect, just to offer a different point of view. All the research I've done in writing the books I have and putting our programs together, there is no difference between bribery and negotiation. If you think of a kid, and kids are my best examples for negotiators. If anyone's listening or watching and they've got a 6-year-old, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. These are at the peak of their negotiating careers. But what will a mother do or father to get their kid to eat vegetables? And it's, if you clean your plate, I'll give you 10 Rand, or I'll give you a bowl of ice cream. And if you look at the textbook definition of bribery, that is bribery.
Yes.
And so what we do as... It could be, and again,
it's all these different words. That's why I was putting in.
But for me, if
the
it's
optimistic side,
if you look at bribery, again the textbooks, but it's not defined as something illegal. It's just, when does it become illegal? And our view is quite simple. It's different lines in sands for different people. Because one thing we might perceive as bribery, another person just sees as the cost of doing business. So for us, if it's going to get you into trouble with the law, or your partner, or your spouse, or your employer, or if it's going to get you in trouble, don't do it.
Yes.
But the actual activity of, if you clean your plate, I'll give you ice cream, is so intertwined. And I like things not to be not negotiable. It's just to leave it open and think, what price must I pay for this transaction to happen? And that's It comes back to your value thing.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that very much, because if we can get a hook on value, and I think back to some time ago, because I'm slightly older than Jono here, but you probably can't tell. But if I look at, for example, sports people, and I go back to a decade to a guy like Bruce Fordyce, who was one of the world's best ultramarathon runners, the value lay for him in achieving a goal that, or an end result that wasn't just a dream or a vision. It was really a specific thing, and that was to win the Comrades Marathon. So the goal was such a burning desire to achieve that it involved a lot of have-to things.
Yeah.
And to me, that if one is not prepared to do the hack, like get up in the morning at 5:30 and run up the hill past SABC and Auckland Park in order to strengthen the Achilles heel here. Don't tell me that that's a want-to activity.
No.
And a lot of people don't want to do it, and therefore I question the value they put to their own goals. And if you translate it into business, what value or what burning desire is it that what they would like? What would they like to really achieve? It's a passion.
Negotiating with yourself, perhaps.
Yeah.
Looking
Yes.
at that kind of example. I mean,
Or asking the buyer.
well, I mean, a good example of negotiating with yourself. I don't know if you watched last night the Red Bull Stratus jump.
No, I didn't.
Wow.
Oh, that was
jumping from 39 kilometers above the
Yeah,
surface
that's
of the
frightening.
earth. Intense, and set 3 records. The highest free fall.
Yeah.
Was one of them the highest balloon manning flight, but.
Yeah.
This was a 7-year project in the making. It wasn't just the other night.
The burning question is, did he really want to achieve that? And the answer would be that was a goal that he probably really wanted to achieve. And therefore, I bet he did a lot of practice and have to things.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to get a handle on this value thing, because for everybody it's fairly vague, and we can concretize it, no doubt, into steps. But I would simply put it that the inclination to do something or to buy something is such a burning one. It's such a passion. You want it, that you're prepared to do certain have-to things. And some of those have-to things might have to be concessions, as you well know, Kim, and those kinds of things. But is everything negotiable individually, like that guy who free-falled for 35 Ks?
No, he free-falled for...
30.
Sure. My maths is going to be letting me go.
He went out into space.
He free-falled for
Went
4
out
minutes,
on
20
space.
seconds on his own, and
It's a hell of a
then
long
parachuted
time.
down, yeah.
Maybe
Insane.
he didn't pass out.
Yeah.
So let's
Did
go
he
back
break
to
this out of...
Swedish
sorry.
Unleashed.
to the
Back to the
questioning.
value question.
Yeah, is everything negotiable? Because I mean, you've said in some circumstances not. But you also said earlier on that we're always selling,
It's about finding value.
doing it.
Yes.
So maybe Kim, what do you believe? Do you think everything is negotiable?
Yes, I do, but it depends. It's not a yes or no. And
It sounded like a no to me.
Yes, it depends.
But it depends. For example, and I love to go back to that movie Indecent Proposal. And Talana knows this example is, under what circumstances would you be prepared to lend your spouse out to Robert Redford or Demi Moore, or whoever's making the offer for your partner, for $1 million? And those were US dollars, not Zim dollars. And you'll get people who say, no, that's absolutely, they don't care about the money. They don't care if they lose their home, which was the plot in Indecent Proposal movie. They will not do it. And if you press and press, there are certain situations under which they would do it, but it sometimes needs to be a matter of life or death. So you'll find that no matter what it is, and it's driven by values, but when we get too attached to our values, I think we shut down as deal makers, as even as negotiators. But the more you can keep things open and say, it depends, if you do this for me, or if that would be the situation, then I could do that. And so I'm very reluctant to say yes or everything is or no, it's not. But ultimately, a deal maker can do any deal, because
Yes.
they don't have a bottom line.
I agree. In the business context, I brought in the sportsman as also has equal
They'll pay with their lives.
validity.
Yeah.
But in the business context, for example, a question like, Once they've realized that, in fact, they've got a problem, and then half the problem is getting prospects to understand that they really have a problem, and secondly, what the consequences are of inaction, and what the consequences are if they take what you're proposing. And if you take, that a stage further, once they agree with that, and we start to come up with solutions that go beyond what they expect, then we start to create value, because we don't have a price commodity, we don't have a commoditization of a product. We get into value, which is things that are unexpected, going beyond the normal.
Don't you think that value works on two levels? It's the business results or outcomes that you can measure, and also what the person themselves gets from the transaction.
Absolutely.
So in taking salesmanship and giving them a solution to a specific area of pain or need, or they see a business result which they can quantify, assume into some kind of value, but also at a personal level, just overcoming the obstacle, and then how do the two collide or combine? That's what I find fascinating about deal making.
Totally.
And that's why I love the value for value thing, because it really opens up the concept that it's not just win-win. It starts suggesting there's values involved, and I'm sure as somebody who's deeply entrenched in the sales profession and teaching salespeople to be professional, you talk to them about the buyer's hot buttons and what's important to that person. And for me, that's not manipulation. That's understanding their value. What their personal drivers are.
Can I just come in just quickly on this, and I'll do just something that I think should happen before that. And that would be before one even does that. There are a number of things that come into play. Do they like you? And in fact, just on a personal level, we can smell people's chemistry within seconds. And if there's not a kind of
there's something about
that must have a huge impact on deal making, though.
Yes, it does.
I know the selling process, but you've got to have some.
Correct. So to me, it would go back a step and saying, okay, sort of kind of, do we get on? And if we're not going to get on, do we agree not to? Can we do it constructively? The next point would be that I think, again, I'm talking from a sales perspective, which you're identifying with very well, Kim, totally, is what kind of ground rules are we setting for this meeting, or this expectation that we are looking at to both achieve? Are the ground rules, for example, assertively put across by the salesperson? Because the buyers are a lot more sophisticated. They're a lot more transparent in terms of we've got information on you, my China, and we know you pretty damn well. You've obviously done your research on us, and if they haven't, well, they should be out the door anyway, fast. Is basically to agree what we call the playing field. In other words, what do we regard as a company acceptable, and as a prospect, what do you agree with this, and what?
Are you talking about specifically sales behavior now? How you interact with?
Just before we even talk value, I'm suggesting that one of the steps towards that would be the playing field. What, for example?
It's almost like negotiating the terms and conditions.
Yeah,
just in terms of your engagement.
Yeah, you're quite right. That's formalising. I'm a pretty informal, casual salesperson, and ask, whatever. I'm just casually informal, but I know where I want to go, and where I want to go is to have not an absolute one cast in concrete, but one which says, for example. When we arrive at price, or let's even go back a step, identifying the consequences of non-action, and if you can, financially, and agreeing that. So therefore, we're pointing out that this person's in a hot spot, and if we can get them out of it, we're going to get the kudos that you're talking about. The second point is that most salespeople don't bother to do that. Not bother is the wrong word. They're not assertive enough to do that, because they think it's just asking too much. Well, I don't think they know.
They don't know.
They don't know
about it.
And they're scared. So, they're scared to offend.
If I can ask, obviously there's a lot about in the sales environment, so business selling to another business, and you spoke about deals. What about are there other areas that if everything's negotiable with conditions within the business world? What about outside of the business world? Because you spoke a lot about the 6-year-old. Trying to get a 6-year-old. me wanting my friends to go to a specific movie and not another movie.
Yeah, for the man on the street, what are some of their takeaways?
Is everything negotiable outside of the business world?
You know, I
My
think
view
the same,
is-
or is it the
my
same?
view is the same answer applies. It doesn't matter whether you a 2-year-old trying to get sweets as your mum checks out in the supermarket where they put all the sweets. I mean, 2-year-olds have their little strategy to get the sweets, and where the mother's got to decide, does she ignore the screaming 2-year-old tantrum, or does she pacify the child with the sweets? And so you can have it at a very personal level, you can have it at a business level, as in a company buying from another company, you can have it at governmental levels. And my delegates on my programs explain it even happens beyond that. And we get into some quite interesting religious debates about how it extends into the spiritual life.
yes.
Mm.
And so I think negotiation is a vital skill, as is selling. You can't, I don't think we can exist as humans without those two skills. But thank goodness we are born with them. Now, not everybody agrees with me on that.
It's a lot of,
So born
No,
versus remade.
I am one of those
I
people
think we
who
are
does not
born
agree.
I'm happy
Okay.
to have that conversation, but I wanted to make the
It
point.
was-
Yeah.
I like what you're saying, John. I'm not listening to you. Active listening is the number one skill. I never heard that point. Is that I think there are certain, in a private capacity, bring it out of the corporate world and bring it out of other examples, and look at, for example, individuals who could ask for a better result if they just had the balls to do it and the courage. And for example, going into a bookstore and, well, let's take an easier example. Target who you're going to negotiate with carefully. Choose your battles carefully. What are types of areas which are open to negotiation? And typical areas would be things like milkshakes. Wimpy wouldn't be, because they're just kind of they're controlled. But smaller SMEs that are just starting up, and smaller businesses, boy, there's a lot of room, because there's not a big boss controlling procedure and policy in a uniform fashion.
So then I want to ask you a question, because we wanted to ask you about this organization called avaz.org. They got, what we said, 16 million, over 16 million
worldwide
people as part
followers
of their,
and supporters.
part of their community, and they organize petitions specifically
Yes,
and
the
targeting, thanks, 16
Kim's done her
million.
research.
No, just look at the website. It's not that
252,455 people that they then mobilize specifically around petitions to governments, to big corporates. And their whole thing is they want to close the gap between the world we believe we could have and the world that exists now. So I was just wondering, is that a form of negotiation when you get 1 million people signing a specific petition, and then you go and you give it to, this government, because you were saying it's come up, like you can negotiate with your 2-year-old all the way up to
your spiritual
Is
life.
that-
spiritual life.
It's
So
the biggest of transactions across
I would.
Yes.
Our question is that if
allies in wars. It
handing
applies.
over a piece of paper, in my opinion, is not really a form of negotiation. It's more like we would like
but
this.
they're having effect.
I'm hoping
governments
you're
are
going to
stopping,
hear me.
changing laws. Corporations are changing, what they were planning to do with that, knowing that 1 million people are saying, we want you to do something else. So
It's a straight power manipulation, which is just to be categoric here. To me, is non-negotiable. I mean, but it does have an effect, which I think was what Kim's going to say.
I think everything's negotiable, but it depends. But for me, put a deal together, negotiation's a component, selling, communication, and then power. So I'm absolutely on side with Clive about it being power driven. My concern, and I'm not directing this at Avaz or the Arab Spring or anything, is yes, it's a massive component in deal making and thus in negotiations fundamentally. But it's fine to get action, but what do they want? And you said something really interesting just now. You said people are reluctant to tell somebody what they want. They haven't got the confidence maybe. You've got to know what you want. So maybe for Avaz, stopping a certain piece of legislation is enough. But if you extend it beyond, then what? There's a reason that legislation would have been mooted in the first point. Or the Arab Spring, overturning the regime, what's it going to be replaced with? So go back to Spider-Man, which for me is the root of all sensibility. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
But so with that power to get rid of a government or make some substantial and probably hugely needed change in the world, then what? You can't just have action for action's sake, otherwise it's anarchy.
I was going to say, it's totally one-sided, and it gathers enough power to affect change.
It's like a coup.
Exactly, and that's not value for value.
And then the question
is
it a long-term win? To me, it's going to be...
And maybe the devil that comes in is worse than the one that was there before.
Correct.
And I suspect we're seeing a bit of that.
The more natural Arab stuff, Spring, than that was more naturally driven, and that was driven by all the modern technology. To a large extent, it was just individuals tweeting all over the place with no sort of strategy in mind, really. Just we're sick of what we're living through.
Yeah.
And whereas a vase would have a strategy, and they would hopefully anticipate the outcome. What I question is they're kind of predicting the outcome in advance of getting feedback, genuine feedback as to where is the client, whoever the client is, in this case a child, or are accepting, are they part of this process, or are they just being told? And I question that.
Sure.
It's like even in our own country, I believe, I was listening to the radio, I can't remember the source, and I don't like citing something without a source, but apparently you can sign up your children to the ANC, or I don't know if it applies to the other parties, before they're born. What happens to their free choice?
Correct.
Well, I suppose they can negotiate their way out of it.
Don't want to participate.
If they're born natural negotiators.
Well, if they get...
They got to attend our course. They got to attend Kim's course.
To that question.
We want enrollments.
A little bit of a punch.
You could say the same for schools as well.
And that's what I wanted to say.
That's why you
Quite
don't
right.
believe negotiators are born because of your school experience. See?
And that's what I wanted to get to. So it's like you can carry on with that. It was more to if everything's negotiable within with some conditions, and things like petitions are just the power. There needs to be more to it. There actually needs to, because maybe for me then what I'm hearing is a VAS or those petition things are a way to create change, but then there needs to be follow-on negotiating from it.
Yeah, there needs to be some consequence.
It's the start of the conversation, really. I don't think it doesn't lead to change at all. It gets people talking and either makes them aware of something they're oblivious to, because let's be honest, most people are oblivious
they don't
to
even know what's going on until they read the VAS report.
It's highlighting that, and then even if they do know, they're like, well, yeah, my life's cool, and
choose.
Yeah, at least they're now given a chance to have an opinion.
It gives an outlet for me.
I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that. I think it's too one-way driven. It's been like that for years. But what has flopped completely in a sales negotiating process, as I'm sure Kim would bear this out, is a unidirectional, kind of, I am the salesperson or the deal negotiator here, and I know what's best. And that kind of pedantic... it's to me arrogant. We need to go in with a level of humiliation.
But that comes in understanding the other person, what's important to them.
Correct.
And that's the art of salesmanship.
And that's the art of natural conversations.
Is that where the value and the win-win has a much better chance of being achieved?
I was just thinking at a much bigger level, and Clive and I had a brief chat about karma before, in the 5 minutes we've known each other, we've covered a lot of ground. But if you have these evil empires, these huge monolithic governments imposing their will, then a VAS is a very important counterbalance to that.
Yes.
It's your yin and yang, your good and bad, your light and dark. And maybe there are consequences to a government taking a unilateral decision, just as there will be for a VAS. But I think you need a VAS if you've got governments that are all controlling and all powerful. You need this kind of anarchy on the other hand.
Well, speaking of that, we've just got a question on the chat. I'm just going to read it out there. What do you think about the limitation of information that a VAS gives its followers? So manipulation of information, propaganda, followers never get to find out about the other side.
Well, begs a bigger question: what's truth and what's reality? Because we all have a different perception of it. So Avaz might be saying we absolutely transparent, which is to steal your word, Clive. But it might be their version of reality. So,
and with
and I
bits of
think there are
information that they can find. Yeah.
But I think what you're saying also, Talana and Jonna, is to what level is the audience really invited to be involved and collaborate in a mutual end result? And that's where I suggest that it's going to have a short term.
So for me, part of the is if everything's negotiable, how do we, as the man on the street, me in my private capacity, go to someone like the government or a big corporate to try and say, I'm not happy with what you're doing, because what you're doing actually is impacting me. It actually is going to have, and it's going to impact my children because it impacts the environment or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And for me, a badge just gives me that voice.
Yes.
It allows me to say, I agree with that, and those guys then go with the million other signatures and say, these people that want you to know that they're not happy. So for me, it's a great.
But we have the choice of whether we participate in the petition or not.
Yes.
But like government's going to be issuing its propaganda, which is, selling is very broad. Propaganda is a form of selling, as is manipulation. So the government will be telling us why this legislation is good, and they'll be convincing us. To the same degree, Avaz will be telling us why it's really bad. And I think that's where balance lies, and please, that they do last longer. But I think there's danger in these unilateral decisions on either side.
I think for me the danger would be a lack of and John alluded to it, and so did you, Tana, is the lack of consultative approach. It's only recently that they've been open a little bit more to feedback. And I would look at a longer-term outcome. In other words, what is the strategy that's going to develop a longer term? And I come back to it, a win-win.
And that's where there was the other movement, and I don't know how much time I got to go into the Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy movement.
Yes.
For me, they've started with a whole lot of talk around, we're not happy, and they're trying to find what the answer is. I mean, my understanding from my research into this, they were collaboratively amongst themselves trying to mastermind what could be an alternative. And also, it's similar.
I think that could work, but they don't have all the information. They're not at the highest level
one of their
with the
key
Reserve Banks as an example.
Is transparency. Will the banks please be more transparent and share? But I think what I'd like to move the conversation towards now is around just maybe one or two key points that we can take away in deal making. And one of the things I thought was very interesting is that if everything's negotiable, to me you could always be then negotiating, never ending and negotiating everything. When is it good to walk away, if ever? Do you ever walk away from a sale?
Is that the first question?
Yeah.
That's a hell of a nice one. May I go?
Of course.
It's a hell of a good one. I just like to think of 4 words. Choose your battles wisely. For goodness sake, don't choose somebody that is non-compromising, that simply is driven by company policies and procedures, that as an individual you're not going to stand a chance. And we're talking about some of the chain stores that are not the retail. The retail thing's open, but those just choose your battles wisely. And when you go there, for goodness sake, do your homework.
But is that across the board? I mean, in every aspect of life, or just in business?
Well, I think it's worth a shot. I don't know the statistics on this one, but I would imagine that 95, 99% of people don't even ask or question, whether this is a realistic and a proper situation. I mean,
you don't ask, the answer's 100% no.
well, if you don't ask, so first of all, I would say do your homework first, because if you can go in there saying that there's a better deal going on bid or buy, compared to what you've got, and your facts are correct, well, I think you stand a damn good chance of winning that one. Where you're talking about things the situations that have been discussed tonight, where you have feel passionate like crazy, but you simply haven't got the weapons or the strategy or the power to do it, then I would suggest walk away and have the ability to walk away and mean it. If you're putting an offer in as a counter offer on a negotiation, let's take in the layman's environment, and you're being told no, don't feel uncomfortable with that. You chose that path. Walk out.
Do you have anything to say?
I just wanted to know, when you say walk away, is it close down the deal and say I've got enough and settle it, leaving something on the table, or is it to throw in the towel? So I think through deal making eyes, not through general wisdom, I suspect, like Clive has.
It's probably thrown in the towel. I mean, is there ever, if everything's always negotiable, you know, within conditions, like
it's
you
very
say,
difficult.
is there ever a time to, okay, well,
because you don't want people to take the soft option and just say, oh, I can't do this deal. You know, deal making is hard and negotiating is hard, and you've got to push yourself a little bit if you want the deal, and you've got to be flexible.
Yeah.
I'm not a great fan of compromise, but I'm a huge fan of flexibility.
Yes.
And be flexible and really take it out for a run, and try and get that deal and keep your options open. For me, you only throw in the towel under very few situations.
Yes, I know, I agree.
And it's, for me, it comes back to your basic values. When you feel like you're selling your soul, get out.
It's that gut feel you spoke of.
It is gut
yes,
feel.
and if you're
if you
prepared to do, absolutely.
I don't think you should sell your soul at any price.
Maybe walk out of the shop and leave the door open. You know, it basically you might even shout back to them, my cell number is, if you change your mind. I mean, keep the door open.
I walk away then. If I've pulled and pushed and tested that deal from every quarter, but I just don't want to do, this is feeling wrong, and it is about gut, and it's as sophisticated an explanation.
And
Follow the gut and look after, looking after your soul. Well, if you'd like to find out more about our guests, please, their profiles are on our website, which is ltp.letstalknetwork.tv. And just very, very quickly, one way for people to get hold of you, Clive?
The website is www.peergroup, Group, one word, .co.za.
And Kim,
www.thedealmaker.com, and we've got our email addresses there, but they all come to me. I see everything that comes into the office.
And we're on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook. And
so you can get all of those details on the profiles on our website. And share your views as us. Do you believe that everything's negotiable? Tell us on our Facebook page or tweet us at LT Possibility. Next week's topic, we are talking to Alon Reyes about the mindset of an entrepreneur, what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Sure, you can take a few pointers from tonight.
But until then, from me, Talan, and all of us here at Let's Talk Possibility, have a great week and go notice the possibilities.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.